Hello, my name is Chef Michael Olson. I'm on faculty at Niagara College and I will be entering my 25th year starting next week. I've taken the last year as a PD leave and I would like to tell you today about how I went about doing that, what my intentions were, what I actually did, and how I'm going to return to school with a renewed sense of enthusiasm, with great energy, lots of stories, and an image bank, and a set of skills around videography that I can help to convey and tell stories to students about this amazing business that I've been lucky enough to be part of. Something else that I was hoping to do over the last year was develop a deeper understanding of the history and culture around food. And this had to do with firsthand experience. I've tried hard to study and read and watch movies and video about different places that are famous for particular dishes and methods and ingredients, but I've been lucky enough to be able to travel to a lot of those places over the last year. So I really do feel that I have a better understanding of what this is all about, and I can speak from firsthand experience. In addition to that, I have been studying French every day. I've done by immersion, and I've primarily used a phone app called Duolingo, and I have been using it daily for 574 days as of today. J'apprends le français tous les jours. And I have a long way to go, but I'm getting more and more comfortable. And I know that in a couple of years that I will be at a working level of French. So I'm quite confident and I feel as though I've come a long way in that regard. My wife, Anna, has been active in food television for a number of years. And this has led her and me in turn to having opportunities opened up where we are invited to travel to certain destinations, to check out tourism opportunities, and in some cases to guide and usher groups of people on a culinary tour. And it's quite interesting because what we've found ourselves working a role into is that of what I would say is interpreter. So if you can imagine someone going on a culinary tour and they're a highly interested home cook or an amateur cook, and if they're presented with a complex tour or something that's not readily understood, they're going to miss out a lot. So I'll use for an easy example is visiting a prosciutto production facility in the Parma region of Italy. And we've done this a number of times. If a lay person arrives at a factory or a production site where prosciutto is made, they would walk in the door, they would get a wonderful welcome, maybe a little taste of wine or some prosciutto or cheese to start off. And then they would be led through a maze of corridors and machinery and storage sites for this ham that's being made there, but they really wouldn't understand what's going on because they're overwhelmed with all the information. What we found our role was to interpret by way of setting up the scene. So because of my experience teaching at the college, I would typically set it up by delivering a lecture on the way to the tour. So let's say a 40-minute to an hour synopsis of the history, culture, the reasons why, and the mechanisms and food safety issues around producing these foods and what makes them famous. That way, when they get to the production site, instead of being blindsided by a mountain of salt or raw meat, they can walk in the door and recognize what I've just discussed with them and say, that's what he was talking about, or this is the part where they X, Y, Z. After the fact, my wife is an expert at developing recipes, so she would prepare for the client a number of recipes so they can reproduce some of the dishes or do their own applications using that product when they get back to Canada. And it's turned out to be a really positive experience for us because it's a business for my wife, but for me as plus one, I basically get to go hang out and sort of be a kid in a candy store at all these culinary destinations throughout Europe. And it's been a really solid chunk of learning for me that I can then come back to the college and share with my students. We started off by flying into Rome and meeting the group and then making our way south down past Naples. We visited Vesuvius and then headquartered ourselves in the Sorrento area just south of the city. And then we would do day trips into production sites for mozzarella, for making dried pasta. We attended a pizza university course, it was called, which was a workshop in pizza making, but it was fantastic. We did a street food tour through Naples, which was pretty remarkable because Naples is famous in many ways. We also visited ancient temples left over by the Greeks, and we went to a winery production tour down on the Amalfi coast. After our visit through the south of Italy, we made our way over to France, and this was to host a different group on a river cruise down the Rhone from Lyon all the way down to the south of Arles. And this started off, we had 2 days ahead of the group, and we went up to the Burgundy region and spent some time in the small town of Beaune. And this was sort of a bucket list for both of us because we've read and heard so much about Burgundy, but had never really traveled there. So to actually be embedded in the epicenter of wine production in this famous area was really something, and it was enlightening to see these famous names and to walk down streets that you know had so much history. And one of the key moments that I'll never forget, and I will talk to students about this, is the simple notion of walking down the street early in the morning, and as you went past different restaurants, you could smell exactly what they were doing. And my wife and I were kind of laughing because it seemed that every 20 or 30 meters, we'd look at each other and say, "Oh, they just deglazed a pan," or "Oh, somebody just pulled bread out of an oven," or "Somebody's making coffee." And I'll never forget the sensation of being in this town that was, primarily supporting the wine business. But of course, food was such an important part of it that everywhere you went, it was like a self-guided tour by way of picking up aromas from all this delicious cooking that was going on. Once we finished that little part, we met our group and toured the city of Lyon to see the historical sites. And Lyon is interesting because it's the gastronomic capital of France. And there's a famous chef who passed away fairly recently. His name was Chef Paul Bocuse, and he was probably, the most famous chef in the world before social media, before widespread internet, and it was because of a long and storied career, and he was always regarded as the best in his field. On the tour, we were treated to a lot of beautiful sights, and I was especially interested in the famous wine growing regions as we headed south down the Rhone. There were different aspects, local forms of transportation ranging from steam trains, lift locks on the river, and so on. But I was especially interested to find a lot of towns and villages with famous vineyards that I recognized from reading about. The gastronomy and the wines in this area are really, really something to behold. And I did learn a lot there, especially about cuisine at a couple of great local restaurants. We also toured with our group a town that we know quite well. It's a small market town called Uzès, and we've traveled there many times. And it was great to be able to show people this idyllic French market town. And it really, for a lot of people, it was the French market town of their dreams. It had everything that you could have on your culinary checklist, you know, from crunchy baguettes and the flakiest buttery croissants you could imagine, a beautiful market with olives and fresh vegetables and fish and cheese, and it just went on and on. We had a really great lunch at a restaurant and a tutored wine tasting from a friend of ours that's in the wine business there. And it was so great to see people not just enjoying themselves, but really learning. And it made me reflect on my, you know, experiences at the college, where sometimes you get caught up in the tough stuff, where you're worried about people attending classes, or there's some form of bureaucracy that's just getting in your way. But what you really enjoy the most is when you see people actively learning, and you know what it's like. You know, you have a good lesson, you have a good lecture, you have a good lab, and you see the look in somebody's eyes and you think to yourself, oh my God, they're getting it. They're actually understanding it. So I was able to experience that with a group of older adults, and it just reminded me that one of the best things that people can do is to learn. On our way back from France, we stopped in Barcelona, and Barcelona is a very interesting place. It's got wild architecture. This is where Gaudi did a lot of work, so there are some incredible buildings and art everywhere in the streets, but they have a very, very keen eye on food culture, and tapas are a big part of this. So we were able to enjoy a lot of different, I wouldn't even call them restaurants. They were bars that served incredible food, and there's a lot of street life that's really interesting. Musicians on the street, sort of dramatic performances, and it's a really exciting city. We were only there for a few days, but Barcelona is always fun. I don't know if I could live there, but it's a great place to go for a couple of days just to remind you how weird life can be. Getting back to Canada, we had some work to do in live streams, and this is something that I really worked on over the last year and built, I'm going to say, a level of expertise. And live streaming is when you're presenting to an audience over a platform like YouTube, for example. Instead of recording your presentation and then having the opportunity to edit it or to layer in some music or to make color corrections, live streaming is like live television. The switch goes on, and if you make a mistake, you deal with it. We found that this was a great way to reach the audience through our YouTube channel, and people do tune in from surprising destinations all over the world in different time zones. So when we go live, we've got people from the Philippines and Australia, from Latin America, from Southeast Asia, from Poland. It's absolutely incredible. And we have a little studio, which I'm in right now. And what we did is we created an environment that mimicked a professional studio. So we run with a multi-camera setup. This is the one I'm looking at now. There's a second camera just to the side of that. And then there's another one that I'm not using today, but it's directly overhead. And if I need a fourth camera, I can use a little mobile and record on that. We had the time sort of open, so we thought, let's go back to France and continue this adventure. And we went through Paris, down south to Nîmes to stay for a while. And one of the sort of really fun experiences was to go back to Lyon that we had visited in the fall.
We've just pulled into Lyon, and a 15-minute walk from the train station is Les Halles de Paul Bocuse. This is the center of cuisine here in Lyon. A beautiful marketplace, and we're going to have a bite to eat. We're in the center of Les Halles, Paul Bocuse in Lyon, and within 2 minutes of walking in, we have found a seafood stall. So we're having the oyster shuckers platter.
One of the sort of memorable parts that I really took as a learning experience was looking into a local style of restaurant. And it always interests me that you don't see certain things when you visit a place the first time. You only peel back the layer on your second, third, or even fourth visit. This is what the French refer to as the deuxième, the second time around, where you see more clearly. And there's a style of restaurant there called a bouchon.
Here in Lyon, there's a style of restaurant called a bouchon, and they tend to be small and intimate, but it's all about this approachable, honest, generously portioned food. Signature dishes. To qualify for a bouchon, you have to have certain dishes on the menu and not stray from that. We had our first experience last night at Les Culottes Longues, long underwear, and I have to say that the hospitality, the conviviality, the portions just spoke volumes. This is the food. When you think of food in France, this is the food you dream of.
We also went to a local restaurant that had recently received its Michelin star. And Michelin is a grading system that's very powerfully recognized in the food business. And it's only recently started in Canada where Michelin stars are being awarded. But this was a small village restaurant of a dedicated team. And I have to say that the experience we had there probably rates up with the top 10 meals of our lives. And it had nothing to do with the bougie show-off things. It was all based on the skill and the knowledge and the confidence that this couple, it was, the husband is the chef, the wife runs the dining room. They had a small team, and everything was just so great that it made you want to just sit back and enjoy it, and then go home and cook yourself to try and get towards that. It was such a rewarding experience, and I've always loved seeing people work at something they're good at, and it was such a pleasure to see these people absolutely thriving in their own métier, just doing what they love and just being so good at it. It was a remarkable experience. In the spring of 24, we took a weekend in New York City just to reacquaint ourselves with what goes on there. We hadn't been in a number of years, and I've always admired the restaurant culture in New York because they are really serious about what they do, and they're true professionals. And we did have a lot of great experiences. We rushed around, of course, to see some highlights and experience some traditional things, like New York style pizza and so on. But we also had some really high-end food experiences in different places that reminded me of where we're at in North America compared to Europe in terms of food style, portions, pricing, service, and so on. And it was a really inspiring trip. Turkey is a place that we had visited briefly once before, but we were limited to Istanbul. And Istanbul is a really amazing city, partly because it's got so much history, but it sits on the border between the European world and the Asian world. It's also a gateway for Africa, so you're kind of at the hub of a great big chunk of the world there. And so as a result, you see everything, you taste everything. And Istanbul is very exciting. This time around, we only transited through Istanbul, and we headed southwest to a city called Bodrum. This is on the Aegean coast, so you're quite close to Greece. As a result, you can imagine the food culture there. It's all about the sunshine food. So it's got elements of what we would think of as Greek cooking, but then it's got this incredible Turkish battery of technique, ingredients, history, and practice that makes it one of the most remarkable cuisines that we've ever experienced. We were able to travel with a guide. We were invited by Turkish Air and the Turkish Tourism Commission to go over and see what they were doing, and in return, what they wanted us to do was to film some material that we will present on Anna's YouTube channel. Instead of taking the equipment that I have in the studio, which is heavy cameras and wired sound, I basically traveled with one of these portable 4K cameras and then little wireless microphone systems. And this is something that I'm very proud to know about, because I feel like when I started my journey into understanding image and sound capture, it was the beginning of the prosumer gear era. There was a time where there was professional gear and consumer gear, and they were totally different. You couldn't get great images with consumer cameras that would be broadcast ready. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there have been incredible changes in the marketplace where now you're getting high quality, almost pro level cameras and sound that's available to consumers. So I've been able to get a lot of experience with these cameras, and we were able to capture a lot of great things along the way. Even your camera is an incredibly powerful tool that's gone from, a picture of Aunt Betty to now you have professionals using these things. I use an app that's based on the camera operation of the same broadcast cameras that I'm looking at now, and it does an incredible job. Visiting Turkey really opened up our eyes to what goes on there from a culinary perspective. The breakfast, for example, is such a big part of their offering. Going to a Turkish breakfast is a memorable experience. It's like a buffet that comes to your table. There are 20 different dishes that arrive, mostly vegetables and mostly savory. They tend not to do too many sweets, but it's very common to have salad for breakfast. You would see people making a breakfast salad with peppers and tomatoes, cucumbers, feta cheese, and olives, and so on. And there was always this sort of never-ending array of meze. And meze are the little appetizers that appear on dinner menus, but they're also quite common on the breakfast table. Breads are generally made to order. So whenever you go into a restaurant, you get fresh, hot breads, typically flatbreads. They can be cooked in a matter of minutes, but it's really something to experience the Turkish breakfast. We earmarked a lot of recipes there that we've incorporated into our own cooking style. And of course, my wife is developing recipes for YouTube and also for her future cookbooks. Another amazing aspect of Turkey is the historical documentation. This is the old world, and we were able to see things that I honestly didn't know about. So it's easy picking to see castles and arenas and places like that, because stone lasts forever. But there are also ancient civilizations that are being unearthed after being covered by dirt for eons. And we visited one location called Ephesus, and they have basically excavated this entire ancient city. And to be able to walk through it, I would have quite honestly been amazed to see a single artifact. And as far as you could see, and I'm talking for kilometers, they were in full display of pillars and buildings and foundations and plumbing, and it was absolutely amazing and really remarkable. It's such a deep, ancient culture that you could spend the rest of your life and not ever know everything about it. It's really something. We had a lot of great dining experiences in Turkey and met some really interesting chefs. And one of the episodes that we will record for YouTube is women in the industry, because we met a lot of really powerful role models, whether these women were sommeliers, restaurateurs, chefs, or tour guides. It was something that I didn't expect to see, and it was such a powerful reminder of the modern business world, and I'm glad to see it.
I'm a chef because I had to, because I have two siblings. I have a brother and a sister, and I had a working mother, so I had to cook for them also. But it's my passion, that's why I do it, obviously. But I studied English literature, and then all my family is kind of related to education. They're teachers, professors, or something, but they wanted me to be a literature professor. Then I said, no, I want to be a chef.
Nobody's looking at what you're doing. What will you eat?
French fries. And also, if Ozan at our home, I will make some cuteness and then convince him to make me artichoke fried, because artichoke is my favorite one.
My motivation is here nature also, because nature gives us lots of art. If I look at the trees and flowers and birds and everywhere, I can just, it's a flash in my mind, and for the food and the colors and the things, it's very enjoyable work.
After our time in Turkey, we took a short flight over to the east coast of Italy, and this is on the other side of Greece, and this is the heel of the boot, and we visited the region of Puglia. Prior to going there, I think the only thing I knew of was the famous breads, the pane pugliese. So this was an eye-opener for me. We were able to visit Lecce, Altamura, Bari, and some other famous places. And they're very well known for their olive production, so olive oil and olives. They have famous breads there, pastas, and of course, the most famous thing that is enjoyed in restaurant menus all over right now is the cheese known as burrata. So we were able to visit these places and see the production of this incredible fresh cheese and eat it right there at the production site. We also went to a place where they made artisanal cold cuts. They specialize in capicola, which is unique to the area because they do something different than in other parts. We enjoyed a winery tour. And of course, we were able to experience the famous breads and pasta because of their long-standing tradition of growing wheat in the region. One of the interesting things about Bari is that there's a section of town where the streets are filled with these pasta nonas, the grandmothers selling fresh pasta that they make and dry, and it's little discs called orecchietti. But we really enjoyed the tour through Puglia, from the exquisite pastries, the bread culture, the pasta, and just the street life in Bari. It was really something else. Getting back to France, we were able to enjoy a spring season, so I do feel quite lucky. I had 2 springs and a full summer this year. but it was getting into full produce season, and we were able to be part of the start of the summer truffle season. While there, we enjoyed different cheeses, great fresh produce from the market, and we cooked a lot. You know, it's always difficult for a chef or two chefs to stay in a hotel, because if you go to the market, you'll find things that you want to cook, but you can't because you don't have a kitchen. Because we were staying in a house, we were able to cook several times a day, especially having guests, and we just thrived on this, trying, you know, little cheeses that we've never heard of, different olive oils, fresh fish from the Mediterranean, just the most incredible breads and pastries, and then working that all together with local wines, especially ones that we had visited before, and getting to know a bit of an understanding of the local sort of offering. On our way home, we stopped in Barcelona again, and just like before, it's a nice short weekend of enjoying the sights and sounds. We did tour Sagrada Familia, the famous church done by Gaudi, and we experienced a lot of great food, especially one place where they specialized and they only served wine, cheese, and then their focus was on the famous Iberico ham, the jamón ibérico. And this is something that they take very seriously. It's expensive. It has a long history. It has special production methods, and it's hand carved to preserve the integrity of the aroma and the flavor. And we sort of settled in and paid for an experience that I would say it was educational as much as it was enjoying the ham. It was a really remarkable experience. Back in Niagara, we did a lot of taping and a couple of live streams, but one of the more interesting things we did this summer, and this was my last sort of exciting trip before going back to school, was we attended a conference in Mexico City called Mexipan. And this is a baking and pastry conference that's held every 2 years. And Anna's got a good following in Latin America, especially Mexico. And over the years, they've tried to get her to be a guest speaker. It just never worked out timing wise. And this year, because of my PD opportunity, we said, yes, we'll do it. So we went down for a week. 5 days were devoted to the trade show, and then we had 2 days of fun. But it was an experience that was full of surprises and enriching, and I'll tell you why. It's a big conference, and we were staying in a neighborhood that was close to this conference center, and even walking in the first time, once I got in the building, to get from the entry to where our station was almost a kilometer. It was a huge building. This conference expected 40 to 45,000 visitors to it. And just like any trade show, there's equipment and ingredients, all these different displays. It's like a city within this conference center. And we arrived on the Tuesday, and the show was about to begin 10 a.m. Wednesday. We were supposed to go at 4, and they said there's a delay. We didn't get there till 8 or 9. And walking onto the trade show floor, it wasn't sort of in the final stages of polishing and getting things ready. It was still under construction. All these booths were being built out of wood. They were being wired, plumbed. And we looked at each other and said, there's no way in the world this is going to be ready for tomorrow morning. Well, I bit my tongue because we got there the next day and it was completely done, carpets laid, polished. And it just showed to me that the way you get things done in Mexico is you have such a huge, talented workforce that even if time's not on your side, you get a lot of people involved. And I'm gonna say there were 500 to 600 people building this thing. And I still don't know how they pulled it off, but it all came together and it was remarkable. So that was an eye-opener. We spent the next 4 days getting to know some amazing presenters from all over South America. There was a great baker visiting from France. There was a chef from England. We met a lot of public, both professionals and consumers, because the trade show was open to the public. And over the course of the time, Anna did demonstrations just about every day. And I did backup for her, but then I just kind of walked the floor and got to know people. After the trade show, we took a couple of days to decompress in a nice neighborhood called Polanco. It's a very easy neighborhood to walk around, great restaurants, a very beautiful place with art and wonderful gardens and parks. And we signed up for a guided culinary tour, which was kind of cool because this is what we do. And then we were now on the receiving end of it. And I'm so glad we did it. What we did was we signed up for a taco tour. And I honestly feel like in that 3 to 4 hour lesson that I went from the tip of the iceberg of knowing very little about tacos to this deep dive where I had this university level experience on a lecture and demonstration. And we tried 5 different taco restaurants in a neighborhood over the course of 4 hours. And our guide was so amazing. She told us about the different varieties, the history, the limitations, the techniques, specific ingredients, and the culture around each of the styles. And it made me realize that what we're doing in terms of doing culinary tours and what I'm doing in terms of sharing, culinary and hospitality knowledge with young people at the college is the path that I want to be on, because learning about food is such a powerful thing. It's such a great sense of understanding and it builds memories. It was just a terrific experience. I hope you've enjoyed my recap of my professional development year, and I'm looking forward to getting back to the school and getting back to my job and sharing my experience with others. I'm also especially happy to share my insights with faculty and staff and encouraging them to come up with a plan for their own professional development. I think it would be a mistake to spend a couple of decades in a job and not have a plan on how you can stay active, engaged, constantly improving, and positive the whole time. The saddest thing for me is when I see somebody in the college who's burnt out and they're bitter and they're just not willing to share anymore. This is a great job, and part of it is being true to yourself and true to the students. And there's a way to come up with a plan to keep yourself active and engaged and on top of your best game. Thank you.